Welcome to Sharing Our Cultures. This is the place where you get to meet amazing individuals from diverse cultural backgrounds who are making significant contributions to the social, cultural, and economic development of Newfoundland and Labrador. Joining us today is Dr. Bolu Ogunyemi, Clinical Assistant Professor of Medicine at Memorial University, Consultant Dermatologist for Eastern Health, and a Visiting Specialist for the Labrador-Grenfell Health Authority. Welcome back to Sharing Our Cultures. And joining me now is dermatologist Dr. Bolu Ogunyemi. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you. It's been a while, and you're a really busy man.
Well, keeping busy.
Right,
It's pretty good.
Okay, so you're the Clinical Assistant Professor of Medicine at Memorial University. Mm-hmm. You're the Visiting Specialist at Labrador-Grenfell Health Authority, mm-hmm. and you're a Consultant Dermatologist for Eastern Health. Mm-hmm. Now tell me how you do all of that together.
Well, you know what? Primarily, I'm a dermatologist in St. John's. I have a clinic, center part of town. But I do, I'm an active member of the university as well. Okay. So I teach medical students and residents, both when we're seeing patients in the hospital and in my own clinic as well, so that they can, have the knowledge and the skills in dermatology to help dermatology patients. Many of them won't become dermatologists, but family doctors do a lot of the dermatologic care in Canada and here in Newfoundland as well. And as for my involvement with the medical school in terms of teaching, so I recently gave a lecture series actually on diversity, inclusion, equity, and allyship to the faculty at the university, as well as graduate students and medical students at Memorial.
Right, that's great. And so some doctors only practice here in St. John's, but you also go out to Labrador?
Mm-hmm. That's right. So, soon after I returned, after my dermatology training, I started working in Labrador. So, and this is because I think it's important that whether you live on the island portion or whether you live in Labrador, everyone deserves equitable, access to healthcare, right? So whether you're in Lab City or Lewisport, or whether you're in St. Anthony or St. John's, I think everyone deserves good care, and that's what kind of underpins my effort in that area. And there are other benefits of working in different settings. I think that the hospital in Labrador is nice because where it's so small, I know all of the referring doctors. I know them quite well actually, as well as some of the surgeons that we work with. So medicine is really a team sport, so it's important to be kind of on the same page and to be accessible with the other doctors that you work with, because many of the patients, we co-manage them together. So there are lots of benefits in working in that setting.
Okay. And I know that you played a lot of sports when you were younger, and you're talking about medicine being a team sport. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so why did you choose medicine?
Well, there are a number of reasons why I chose medicine. The big thing is I always wanted to help people, and I saw medicine as a way to do that. And the other thing is I was always interested in people's stories and just learning more about people. And I think a lot of medicine is communication. I think a lot of people think, the medicine and the science, and of course, that's the foundation is the science and the knowledge. But, if you're not a good communicator, then it's hard to be a good doctor as well. So I thought it was nice because it really marries, my different interests in health advocacy, communication with my individual patients and with kind of patients on the whole. And of course, the science and seeking the truth and doing that as well.
All right, yeah. Well, that's great. And now I know your father's a medical doctor, mm-hmm. and you chose to go into dermatology as opposed to maybe oncology or cardiology. Why specifically that?
Well, dermatology, I think there are a number of unique benefits. So, for example, I really enjoy the diversity of the cases that we see. So, in the morning I might be dealing with skin cancers, and in the afternoon I'm at the hospital treating severe drug rashes, and then we see common things as well: acne, psoriasis, eczema. So I think just the variety and the different cases that we get to manage, it's really important to me. Other benefits of dermatology are most of our diagnoses you make just by looking at a patient. You look at a patient, sometimes you'll have to feel the lesion. So before we won't need biopsies and x-rays and blood work and this and that. We just look at the patient most of the time, determine our diagnosis, and then with them, help to come up with a management plan. So that's really appealing as well. And then another major thing was I get to treat both children and adults, which is nice. Some of the other medical specialties focus on one or the other, but dermatology, gives me the range to treat all sorts of patients.
Well, that's great, and we're glad that you are a dermatologist here in our province, because when our daughter was younger and we took him to the doctor one time, we'd stayed up all night and she was itching, and so we went and the doctor says, well, I can't really tell chickenpox on a black skin. So he really couldn't help us, for sure what was going on. So it's great to have someone like you who can work in, a diverse group of cultures. That's
right. So I'm glad you brought that up, actually. So when I was in UBC for my training, I actually spent some extra time in London in a clinic called London Ethnic Skin, because I think that, as a dermatologist, again, treating all patients, you should also treat patients of all skin types, right? So patients with really light skin to patients with quite dark skin and everyone in between. So we find that a lot of, dermatology textbooks, because when dermatology was created, our population isn't as diverse as it was today. So a lot of dermatology textbooks will focus more on the lighter skin because that's just the population that was around. So since I thought that I didn't want to have that kind of blind spot, if you will, so I purposely went out of my way to, to make sure that I was seeing patients of all skin types, because I knew when I was going to come back here to practice dermatology, I wanted to be able to help patients of all, different skin types. So you were talking about your training. You had to leave the province to train as a dermatologist. And so tell us, where did you do that and what did that entail? So I did my medical school here, and I was actually quite involved in the medical school. I was president of the Medical Student Society, and I spearheaded the accreditation efforts in medical school. And we did have full accreditation when I graduated in 2013. But since I wanted to do dermatology, I knew that I had to leave the province because we don't have that training here. So the plan was to go to the University of British Columbia. So I was in Vancouver for 5 years, and it was an excellent time. They have world-class facilities, researchers, and clinicians teaching me. So it's great to be able to get that training, and of course to bring it back here. And besides my training in Vancouver, which was the home base, I spent some time in London, as I mentioned. I spent some time in tropical dermatology in Vietnam, and I spent some time in a refugee health clinic, as well as a clinic in what they call the Downtown East Side, which is actually one of the poorest neighborhoods, not just in BC, in all of Canada. And I delivered dermatologic care there as well, because I think it's important to kind of meet people where they are. So rather than having them come to the hospitals, it's easier for me, instead of working at the hospital, to go to the clinic, right in their community. So, those are some experiences and some skills that I can bring back to Newfoundland. So I had a great time in Vancouver. And, and besides, work, I'd be remiss to mention I met my wife in Vancouver, and we got married there, actually. She came back to Newfoundland with me. So, yeah, it's been great. Yeah, that's good. Now, you mentioned earlier that in your lecture series, you talked about diversity and working with various skin types. And so can you elaborate a little bit on that? So the lecture I gave the faculty was mainly about diversity in medicine and in academia, and about some of the barriers. So both diversity in terms of ethnic diversity, but most of the talk was actually about women in medicine. The further you go in terms of leadership, we'll have fewer women will be represented. Just one quick example: 17 medical schools in the country, only 5 have ever had a female dean. And fortunately, Memorial University is one of them. We have our current dean is Margaret Steele. But so when I talk about diversity, it's both in terms of gender as well as ethnic diversity. But in London, where I did my training at London Ethnic Skin, that was mainly based on seeing patients of all different skin types. So you mentioned the case with chickenpox. So I think that when we think of chickenpox or things like eczema and psoriasis, you should know what it looks like in all different skin types. So then when you see it as a dermatologist, you should be able to manage them regardless of what skin type the patient has. Right. And as our province becomes more culturally diverse, and we have more people from diverse ethnic backgrounds, then that's even more important. That's right. That's right.
all the doctors, or at least get trained on how to treat people from diverse cultural backgrounds.
That's right, exactly. So I mean, that's some some of the changes that are happening in St. John's, Newfoundland, and everywhere. Globalization and diversification. So I think it is important that we kind of keep our medical training up to speed with that.
Right. Yeah, and which is what you're doing as well. I don't really know where you find the time to do all of that, but you are very busy. And now, if we're thinking about sharing our cultures, we engage high school youth to give them opportunities to learn skills, academic skills, and to think about their post-secondary education. And now, if some of them want to go into medicine, what would be your advice?
Well, I think, compared to maybe several decades ago, I think as a profession in medicine, we're realizing that there are benefits to diversity in terms of, urban versus rural background, socioeconomic status, gender diversity, ethnic diversity, indigenous status, etc. So really there's room for everyone in our profession. So I think that's very important. I do think that medicine is academic. The training is long, medical school, and then there's specialty, whether you choose family medicine as a specialty or another one like myself. So of course you have to just demonstrate that you are capable of doing all the academics. And I think a lot of people know about the academic side of medicine, but there's a lot of medicine in terms of communication with folks, advocacy for health, and empathy as well, and leadership. So those are also important skills to have as a doctor, and therefore also important for folks to consider if they want medicine as a career. And what's nice is that there's many different ways you can show that. Some people will spend time in charity, some people will volunteer in a hospital. I talk about medicine being a team sport, so if you're it's doing things in sports or music or what have you, I think there's lots of avenues that you can show that you can take, learn a certain set of skills and apply those to be a doctor.
All right. And so whilst they're in high school, should they focus on specific subjects?
So I went to Booth Memorial High School. I did a lot of science and math. I was always interested in science and math, and I did extracurricular science fairs. Some people called me a mathlete because we would take part in kind of I think it was a Eastern School District-wide math competitions. So for me, I was naturally interested in that anyway. But it's interesting because when I went to undergrad, I actually did a double major. So I did a major in sociology as well as a major in medical sciences. So I think that in many ways, medicine is an art and a science. So I chose to do a little bit of both. So I don't think it really matters, how much of one subject you do, because they do, for medical school, they do teach everyone as if you don't have any of the medical training, right? So just find something that you like, and then it's easier to, study for it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're going to have a short break, and when we come back, we're going to find out what life was like for you growing up in the West End of City of St. John's.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I have with me Dr. Oguniemi, the only African-Canadian dermatologist in the province. Now, you were the only student in your class from Africa when you were growing up. What was that like?
Well, it's actually not something I spent a lot of time thinking about. That's right. So it was me and my brother, who was always a year ahead of me. But, we did hung out in the same groups and played on the same sports teams and, the same kind of gallivanting, traveling on the weekends as everyone else. So for me, I thought that we had a lot more in common, right, with our people in our neighborhood and people in our classrooms, et cetera, than things that were different. So honestly, it's not something I spent a whole lot of time thinking about. But I mean, one good point. So certainly you want to stay out of trouble, right? So if you're identifiable, you want to stay out of trouble. But I'm just kidding. That's something that we typically did anyway.
That's right.
But I mean, I had it was great kind of growing up. I had a great childhood. So that's not something I spent a whole lot of time thinking about. It was almost a little bit of a default for me, because that's the way that was the way it was when we came here for kindergarten and this and that.
Right. That's right. So yes, your parents came here when you were well, much younger, I think about 3. And so when you were living in Cowan Heights, were there other children there from Africa, or you were the only ones?
I think we were the only ones. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We've been there, about 30 years now. My parents still live in the West End, but things are changing now. Certainly. Yeah, things are definitely changing now. I think it's a lot more diverse, all around the province, certainly in St. John's and the greater St. John's area. So it's interesting because, back then I think a lot of the Africans knew most of the other African families around, your family and many others. But now now there's a very large community. So it's kind of nice seeing that change,
Yes, yeah. Right. I remember what you just said there about you had to be careful not getting into trouble, because we used to always tell our children, now their school was over by the Avalon Mall, and we used to say, you're not allowed to go to the Avalon Mall, because if you go there and something happens, then you'll be the first ones they'll pick out of the crowd. So we always had to think about that. But now it's so different because it's so culturally diverse, and so school's a little bit different even today in terms of the population. So what was your experience actually in school? I know your brother was in the same school as you were, but did you see yourself represented in the school? Did you have any teachers from Africa or principals?
I don't know that I did. I think the province was more homogenous back then. This is the 90s we're talking about. So I didn't think that we were represented as much. But so again, part of it is, a lot of our family friends, and I think for a lot of people, when they go to a new community, a lot of the people you'll meet that'll reach out to you will be other, Africans or Nigerians. So we kind of had a bit of, kind of the best of both worlds in a sense. So, at home, especially when we're younger, we'd eat a lot of Nigerian foods and, Nigerian customs. And then when we went out to school, we're just like, just like everyone else, right? And it's funny when kind of growing up, because my brother and my sister and I, are Canadians first. So we'll, and so are my parents, but we'll say, sometimes we would say things like, well, mommy in Canada, this is what they call it, right? So, and then mom jokes, she's like, we're the ones that brought you here. But, for us, we're used to saying, in Canada, this is what they call it. So it's, it's kind of interesting having that. I think it's good to appreciate other cultures, and we did, because of course we, came from Nigeria. But of course, I think it was really easy for us to, to get integrated into the society here. All my, friends were great growing up at a big diverse group of friends growing up. So for me, it wasn't an issue at all. I know, other people have different experiences, but yeah, growing up was fine. I just felt like I was one of the guys, and still feel that way, actually.
Right. Yeah, well, that's great. And well, now you're here, you have a young daughter, Eliana. I think she's about, how old is she
10
now?
months.
Oh, she's 10 months now, right? That's an exciting age.
Yeah.
And what would you want school to be like for her?
Well,
now?
I think, I think my schooling and childhood was great. I was actually very, I love going to school. So I was very happy. And well, I did enjoy summers as well, but, I was very happy when September came around and back to school and seeing friends and getting in the routine. So I think that, of course, impressing upon her the importance of school and the importance of balance as well. I think it's important to just, take opportunities, especially opportunities that might not seem like they're up your alley, but I think that's where most of the growth occurs. In fact, so I gave a TEDx St. John's talk about the edge effect, and so that is an idea that I expressed to her. So the edge effect gets its name because it's at the intersect of two distinct ecosystems, like the savanna and the grasslands, at the greatest number of unique organisms that can be found. So I think that applies to humans in real life as well. So I think that when you meet people with different, from different backgrounds or with different perspectives, then a lot of creativity and innovation can come from that. So I think it's important to to keep an open mind and to take advantage of different opportunities, especially growing up in school. It's a very safe place to do it. So I took part in, sports and music and drama and student council and public speaking and a little bit of all those types of things. Right. And then it's just a great time to kind of, find what you like, to explore, to adventure. So I think the main thing is just to just keep an open mind, look for different opportunities and don't kind of write things off.
Okay, thank you. Now, you're a prolific writer, not only of academic journals, but you've also written in national and provincial magazines, newspapers. And what has been your passion in writing a lot of those articles that you've written?
Well, I think it's just communication. I think it's just important to communicate. It's a bit of both. I think I do have, some of it is a duty. I think some ideas, with my position in medicine and so on, I think it's important to communicate it with folks. And the other part is also a passion. I personally like to write as well. We talk, I did an arts major in undergrad. So it's a little bit of both. So for example, a lot of my work, most of my work probably is at the intersection of health and diversity and social justice. So I think those are important messages to share. I think that, I do have a unique perspective. There's not many, Africans, I think, that have been in Newfoundland as long as I have. So I think that I can kind of speak to both. So both, how it was, Newfoundland is a great place for immigrants to come, and I think that I just like to use my platform to get that idea out, So hoping to get more people contributing to our province, not just economically, but also, culturally contribute to the fabric of our province. And I think it's important, diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism are important ideas that I like to write about, as you mentioned. So whether it's the New York Times or the CBC or the Huffington Post or the Globe and Mail. So those are some of the avenues that I've been fortunate to be published in, and just sharing those ideas that I think need to be heard.
You studied in BC. You met your wife and you got married. And I'm sure there were many opportunities, many places in the world for someone like you with the training you have. Why did you choose to come back to the province and work here?
Well, so my wife's also a physician, and we made the joint decision to come back. So for me, Newfoundland has always been home. So it's kind of an easy decision in a lot of ways. My family's here, my first memories are here, my fondest memories are here, and all my friends are, most of my friends are still here, and if they're not here, they regularly kind of come back to visit. So it's nice to get back into that feel. And versus my wife's from Vancouver, it's a much bigger city. But if you're in St. John's, if you're around town for a day, there's no way you're not going to run into someone or sometimes someone's parent or someone you knew from kind of growing up. So for me, that's really nice and important. So that was a factor in coming back. We have a strong medical school here, and happy to take part and get on faculty and contribute as well. So those were some of the factors bringing me back. Now, to be honest, the weather's not as nice as it is in BC, so that part was a bit of a tough sell for my wife, but I'm glad that, certainly glad that we came back, and she loves it here as well.
So if someone's thinking of relocating to the city or coming to the city to stay here, to work and raise their family, what sort of advice you'd give them, like based on any challenges that you faced or ways in which they could prepare themselves before they come?
To St. John's? Oh, sorry, someone coming to St. John's for the first time, or?
Yeah.
Well, I think St. John's is a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. I was raised here, and I plan to raise my daughter here as well. So I think it's an excellent choice. I think we do kind of have a mix where we're big enough. We have the airport. Things are getting more and more diverse, right? A lot more diverse now. We have the international farmers market, etc. So you can see, different parts of the world represented right here in the city. So I think that we have those benefits, but we're still small enough, and we're safe. For example, Dr. Fitzgerald and the rest of the team did a great job handling the pandemic. So I think there are a lot of benefits. So we have the benefits from being small, but we also have some benefits from our, from our size as well. So I think it's is a great place. I think it's, I'm very happy for the future of the city and the province as well.
Right, because now we have a new premier.
That's right.
And things are going to change a bit. So do you see areas in which the city could improve or the province could improve in how they welcome newcomers to the city?
I think the province is actually doing a good job of that. For example, I know organizations, the Association of New Canadians and your organization, Sharing Our Cultures, there's a lot of programming. I've been to many of the events. I actually spoke at the Atlantic Immigration Summit a couple of years ago, but I've been to the diversity summits. So I think there's a lot more resources actually than when we first came, from what I understand. I know, for example, I think you and my mother and a few other women started one of the first African associations in the province, right? So that's, I don't know, late 80s or maybe probably early 90s. Yeah. So there's, from that kind of one small group to now there's many organizations, and they both have multiple, or they all have multiple kind of areas that they're helping people integrate. Yeah. I think it's great. In my field of medicine, there's a refugee clinic as well. Right. So, specifically for their needs and helping with translation and so on. So I think, there's more and more resources here. So I think it's a great, but at the same time, we're still also true to our heritage, right? So, the ocean has been very important to Newfoundland culturally, certainly economically, right? Yeah. Whether it's getting fish from the ocean or getting oil from the ocean, or just being near the ocean in our view. So I think that's important to keep as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's certainly been a pleasure having you here on Sharing Our Cultures today. And of course, I do remember those times when we met with your parents and we're putting together the African Association, and so much has grown since then. But I really want to wish you all the best in your work and your travels. And thank you so much again for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Thanks to Dr. Bolu Oguniemi and to you for joining us today. Join us again next time as we share more remarkable stories of individuals from around the world who've come to call this place home.